Bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The CINIKRADIO podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio podcast. Here your host, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Igrihe.
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
And this is episode 146 of the Cinik Radio podcast, and I'm your host, Cinik, and joining me, as always, three people who will definitely smack you upside the head with a twisted tea can if you say one more unflattering word about Dr. Anthony Fauci, Igrihe, Ryan, and Kim. And on this week's show, we are breaking down the year that was 2020 and all its shelter-in-place glory. This being one of my favorite shows of the year because we get together and talk about our favorite movies and TV shows. We're also going to touch on the news stories that define the world and pop culture. In COVID land, TV and streaming reigns supreme. So let's go through our favorite top three shows of the year. Kim, what's your number three pick?
So my number three pick was kind of a late in the year newcomer, so to speak, and it was the Queen'S Gambit. I absolutely loved this show. I didn't think I was going to, because I don't know beans about chess, but it was so much more than that. And the way it was casted, the time period, the 60s and 70s, just every little detail about the show was just a knockout of the park for me. And I thought it was super fun. And with, basically there being a girl genius who found a niche being able to have an outlet in playing chess that she learned in an orphanage and like coming from nothing and becoming something. I absolutely adored it. We sat and binge watched it, I think, over the course of a day and a half.
So Queen's Gambit's on my list too. It's my number two for the year. And the thing I love about it is it gives hope for us of the hopeless, right? Most of us are geeks. We live on kind of on the fringe like the star of this show did, and it gives hope. That and it makes the absolute borefest of watching chess being played somewhat exciting. It was really interesting that they could take something like that. And I know this is all based on some people of historical factual accuracy or something, and it might be a number of people that it's based on, but it's really just interesting how they were able to put it together and make people care about something that 12 people in the world care about. It was really well done. It was really well shot. Lots of fun things to watch in it. And I agree with Kim that it was a lot of fun. And I mean, it followed typical things where it kind of did the rise, fall, and rise again as somebody in kind of a position, succumbing to drug use and alcoholism and coming through on the other side. But it was still an enjoyable watch. It was really well done.
I believe that's a Netflix show, right?
It is.
Ryan, what's your number three?
All right, so first I'll say I cheated a little bit because my 1 and 2 aren't on my actual list because you guys have them. So when we get to them, I'll talk about them. But it gives me a chance to talk about more shows. But so my number three show, I honestly any of these could be number 3, 2, or 1 for me, but I'll start with What We Do in the Shadows, season 2. If you haven't seen season 1, it to me is, along with Atlanta, is probably the best comedy on TV. It's just so well written. It's weird. It's irreverent. It's not afraid to go for it. I think season 1 was great, and season 2 just took what was great about season 1 and it was just that much better. Just really one of the best comedies on TV. Highly recommend that you watch it. There's so many in jokes and great little things. Like my wife got me like 3 or 4 What We Do in the Shadows shirts for Christmas, each one with its own little inside joke based on the show, where when I wear it, if one person out of every 10 times I wear it acknowledges it's like the best thing in the world. So I just really, one of the best shows on TV.
You know what's fantastic about that show is the sheer, utter, dry, sarcastic sense of humor that they have. And it's like sometimes they're smiling and you really got to pay attention sometimes. did he mean that? Or like this must be how my husband feels when I'm trying to crack a joke with him sometimes, because I'm just like, oblivious to, the tone of how I'm saying things. But I found myself laughing more at that show than probably anything. And I'm so happy that you brought that up, because I completely forgot about it. Because again, I think it's on Hulu. So we sat and we watched both seasons like concurrently, just like back to back. And that was in like July. Well, so much has happened since then. I completely forgot how much I love that show.
Yeah, that's the hard part about binging through stuff, is that by the end of the year, you forgot that, that was a thing. But you take The Office and Always Sunny and mix it with a little bit of True Blood, and you've got this show. Like, it's just a wink in the nod, and it's so off the wall, and it's so hilarious. And I would advise anybody to try to watch it, because they just crack you up in so many different ways. The Energy Vampire is without a doubt my favorite character on TV, because he reminds me of so many people I know.
So Ryan, the way you were talking about that, I have just a real simple question. When you and your wife have minor disagreements that really don't mean anything, do you hiss at each other now?
If I really want to get in trouble, I should do that one day.
Because that's my wife and I, after watching this show, that's what we've done. If it's like, what should we have for dinner? I want hamburgers. I don't want hamburgers. We just start hissing at each other, and it's great, right? It's a good way to kind of blow off some steam when you have just a goofy disagreement. And that's something that came directly from this show. And it's just a hilarious show. And I recommend that anybody that starts watching it, watch it with your significant others so that you can start hissing at each other.
Love advice from IG.
IG, what was your number 3 show?
So my number 3 show would be Space Force from Netflix with Steve Carell. And I guess it's probably because I'm such a big fan of The Office. And it's not really like that, but at the same time, it kind of is. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's basically about, the U.S. government launching the Space Force, which is actually happening. I think they just had their first class of recruits graduate from basic training. I think it was like 6 people.
The Guardians.
I don't know what 6 people are going to do in the Space Force, but there's all kinds of things going on. Like, they're trying to come up with new uniforms in the show that somehow look like a cross between a cosplay and a British Royal Guard from like 1400. There's all kinds of crazy things going on, and it's just like Steve Carell is lovable Steve Carell in this show. I mean, he's trying to be a military commander, and at the same time, he's failing drastically through the whole thing. It's not the greatest show, but just because of everything that happened with it and how it got made and when it got released, I kind of fell in love with it. I kind of like it.
The timing was really good for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's on my list. I haven't watched it yet, but you can't go wrong with Steve Carell in anything. My number 3 show was Outlander Season 5. 2020 has given and taken a lot of amazing people in and out of my life, but none more than the characters in this journey of Claire and Jamie. They take you on this historical march through time where Scotland is fighting for their independence. It's a great show. I loved binging the first 4 seasons, and season 5 was no letdown. If you're a fan of history or romance or action, I mean, you can't go wrong with the show. It's a Starz original. Season 6 is on its way. Watch it. You'll definitely thank me for it. Kim, what was your number 2 pick?
So my number 2 pick was another, I think it was a Netflix show, Bridgerton. And I think it came out right at Christmas, the day before Christmas or whatever. Essentially, it's during the regal era of England, and it follows this huge group of siblings who are basically just royalty. The father had passed away, and they're all trying to kind of find their way. The oldest daughter is sort of a debutante, and she is being married off to, I guess, the highest suitor. But she ends up falling in love, of course, with the uncanny character, the vagabond, the man who has no feelings and has massive daddy issues. Anyway, long story short, it's only 8 episodes, but the show itself is so good. It's just raw. It's rugged. It's not something for kids to watch, that's for sure. But the costumes and the characters and everything, that it was well casted, and it keeps you intrigued. And, I found myself at Christmas time thinking, this is like, I don't know why, but I always think 1800s for some odd reason when I think Christmas time. And this just kind of fit in right with that aesthetic. And so for me, it was my number 2. I absolutely love it. But then again, I'm kind of a softie for like these British royal shows. So
now my understanding with that is that it's full of all kinds of sexy times and everything.
Yeah, it's definitely not for kids.
The funny thing is all the press that I've read about it is how they were able to achieve sexy times.
A rape scene for a guy.
I kind of laugh because that's really going to bring in an audience, whether we like it or not. Like the fact that they're like, this is how we were able to get such steamy sex scenes in this thing is like, okay, now you're going to get an audience.
Well, and it doesn't hurt that, both of the main characters are gorgeous. There was this huge controversy because a wedding is not solidified unless it's been properly consummated. And this guy made this dying oath to his rat bastard of a father that he was never going to he was not going to carry on the family name. I'm not going to produce an heir to, your kingdom or whatever. And so this guy, I don't know what I am and am not allowed to say, but he wouldn't finish the job, right? He would start it and he wouldn't finish it. And so this girl had no idea, no education experience whatsoever. And she didn't know any better. She just thought things were completed and she had to go to her, her daily maid and ask her, like, how does this happen? How do kids get made? And so she explains the process to her in a very awkward fashion. And the woman ends up basically mounting him and forcing him to complete the deed.
Well, you have me already. Now I want to watch it.
So there was this huge controversy because they're like, women are raping men. Oh my God. But anyway, the show's really good. Y'all should watch it.
Ryan, your number 2?
So my number 2, I've got Ted Lasso. I didn't really watch any previews for it, and I knew kind of the premise, which was basically there's an English football or soccer team. The wife of the owner, who is now the owner, or the ex-wife of the owner, basically wants to tank the team as revenge, and brings in an American football coach to coach the football team. And so in a different world or a different story, this guy is a buffoon, and the whole show is basically a joke about this character Ted Lasso and what a dumb American he is trying to lead this football or soccer team, and that's what I expected. But it is completely not that. It is in a world where everything we have is kind of dark and gritty, and the humor is generally dark, and we have these characters who are shades of gray and often anti-heroes. He's just a really good guy who's just genuine, like, goodness and charm infects everybody, even the evil owner of the team, who you expect to be basically his the foil for the entire season, and the person that he has to fight against. She even falls in love with him and begins to kind of change her ways. So I just thought the show, just purely because it's just so different from comedies that we're used to, it's just a genuinely good show about a genuinely good character. It's really well written. It's really funny, and it could have been a completely different show, and I love that it kind of subverted my own expectations and went a completely different way with it. And again, it's just a heartfelt, really just good show that makes you feel good about life, and especially in this time, in this day and age, it was actually really a great watch and a great show to watch, and kind of be a little uplifted.
Apple must own 2 billboards outside my job, because that show got advertised like crazy. Every time I came out to get a cup of coffee or leave for the day, Ted Lasso was up there. So they're definitely pushing it. They believe in the product, and you can't go wrong with Jason Sudeikis. I mean, the guy is absolutely hilarious. IG, what's your number 2?
Well, I did talk about my number 2 already a little bit. So yeah, that's just going to be The Queen's Gambit. It was Kim's number 3. It's my number 2. I liked it a lot. It was a lot of fun. It was pretty interesting to watch, like all kinds of just different things going on in it. If you haven't watched it, give it a look. It's pretty good.
My number 2, and I've got to admit it because I was late to the party, I went from naysayer to true believer, as this documentary went from source of hilarious memes to a national obsession. It's a story of murder, intrigue, and meth mouth. If you haven't watched it yet, the world needs to watch Joe Exotic. The Tiger King was absolutely hilarious and riveting. The cast of characters took a hard look at the privatized zoo industry and why you shouldn't do meth and why this guy should probably never step outside of prison. It was gripping in so many ways that I didn't believe it would be. I would hold it right up there with Making a Murder as far as one of the best documentaries of the last 5 or so years. There's a lot more to this story than the outside looks. So I would suggest everybody take a look at it. That's
totally on my honorable mention list. I think America just kind of became obsessed with this fad, this, Joe Exotic craze. There wasn't a single person that I would talk to that hadn't seen it or hadn't heard about it or, oh my God, everybody won't shut up about this on my Facebook feed or whatever. I mean, it was everywhere. And I guess it's not over. He's currently seeking a presidential pardon or something like that. The guy is nuttier than a squirrel turd. I think we can all totally agree with that sentiment. But there is definitely something up with that Carol Baskins chick.
Oh yeah, she killed her husband 100%. Or so says Ryan George. Kim, what was your number one show?
At the risk of sounding predictable, my number one show was the most recent season of The Crown. I have been obsessed with this show since it came out in 2016, and this is the year that they finally introduced Princess Diana. And the woman that they casted is Elizabeth Debicki, and she was Aisha on Guardians of the Galaxy 2. She was the gold princess, and this woman just freaking knocked it out of the park. I mean, she is a spitting image of it. The makeup and hair people that they have on this show, I mean, it's enough to give you chills. I mean, you really feel like you're watching an actual filmography about Princess Diana when you're watching this. It's like one of those scenarios you never forget where you were when you hear certain, traumatic events in your life. And I know exactly where I was when the news came on that, Princess Diana was, killed in a car accident. So for me, that was a moment where my mom and I were just like glued to the TVs. And so watching this now and the way that they filmed it and how tasteful they do it, which I'm sure they're under heavy scrutiny from, the royal family to not screw this up, because they did have to get special permissions and actually consult with advisors on certain events to make sure that they weren't going too far outside the realm of, what is or isn't acceptable to them. So that they're not painting too much of a false story or a narrative. But that's a lot of effort to have to go through in order to share a story. And it just paints everything from a completely different perspective. Whether most of it's true or not, I don't know. And I, honest to God, don't freaking care, because I just love the way that they did this. And again, Netflix, damn you, you've got my soul.
They really do keep coming out with stuff over and over and over again that just drags you back in. Every time I think about ending my Netflix relationship and just unsubscribing and coming back when, say, Stranger Things comes back, something else pops up on my feed and I have to watch this. So they definitely know what they're doing. Ryan, what's your number one show?
I put Criminal UK. If you haven't watched it, so it's only 4 episodes this season. To me, it's just really compelling, because it's one of, with every, there's millions of detective shows and millions of cop shows. And with this show, all it is basically the entire show takes place. It's self-contained. It's in an interrogation room. So each episode, you've got the detectives or whatever whatever they're called in England, and then you have the suspect, and it's just them in an interrogation room. Sometimes they step out of the room and you'll see the detectives talking with each other or whatever, but it's just that, and it is really compelling TV. This season had Kit Harington, had what's his name, Raj, I think, from Big Bang Theory, who's playing completely against type. In fact, to the point where I'm not a Big Bang Theory fan, but my wife is, and she didn't realize it was him until I pointed it out. But it's just compelling TV, and it's only 4 episodes, and I just wish they had more, because I could just sit there and watch hours of the interrogations. I think it's really well done. There are a lot of shows that could have been in this place, but that was one that I just kept coming back to as something that I really enjoyed watching. And again, I love that we don't see the criminal committing the crime. We don't see them running around interviewing people. We just get the interrogation, and it's again really compelling.
So my number one show for the year, because I'm the biggest Star Wars nerd in the world, has got to be The Mandalorian Season 2. I can't think of anything that probably impacted me bigger over the last year. Maybe the last 5 or 6 years as far as Star Wars goes, because it was just so good. From getting emotional when Luke shows up in the final episode to having Boba Fett show back up and be an actual badass instead of just a dude that looks badass. The story writing was great. The visuals were awesome. They looked like they spared very little expense in any of the making of the show. I can't wait to see what season 3 brings, because it looks like we're getting away from the wolf and the cub. So we're going to see some other aspects of being a lone Mandalorian in the universe with other Mandalorians now in the picture. I can't wait to see what it brings next, but if it goes downhill from here, the first 2 seasons have been wonderful, and I'll always have that.
Yeah, like when I said there were 2 shows that were really my 1 and 2, this is probably 1. It was a phenomenal season, especially with season 1 being so great, and we had such high expectations. I was afraid that maybe we'd be disappointed, but they knocked it out of the park. Like the first half of the season starts a little slow, although I still think the episodes were great. But I mean, it just kicks it into gear, and every episode it was like, well, they can't top that, and then they find a way to top it, and then they can't top that, and they find a way to top it, and then we get Luke, and there's a world where that's done and it's not done well, or it's done in a way that is a letdown, and it's not. Like, I expected it. I just knew there was only one Jedi that was going to be able to show up. It was going to be Luke, and somehow it still, had me, gave me the feels, gave me goosebumps, and is a scene that's up there with the Vader scene in Rogue One, that as something that I could just watch on repeat. As we've talked about before, like the music is phenomenal. This, just everything about this show was awesome, and yeah, they knocked it out of the park. And yeah, like Ike said, if the next season can be dog shit, and we have these first 2 seasons, that, even if they ended the show now, it was a perfect ending. Everything comes full circle, and I could just watch these 16 episodes, for the rest of my life, if the rest of the series, just goes to crap.
What I loved about it was the fact that you didn't need to be a Star Wars fan to enjoy it. I introduced it to a few people that had never seen a Star Wars movie, and they absolutely loved it. It was a perfect season. We were throwing out 10s like Joe Exotic threw out meth to his boyfriends. I mean, it's safe to say that we all loved it. It was all our number 1s, but we wanted to pick different things just for variety. I can't say enough good things about what's been done, and I don't think this train is slowing down. I have a feeling that the Star Wars universe is going to pick up in a colossal way, because they now have a roadmap with what Marvel did, and they're going to follow it to a T, and they're starting to finally listen to the fans that want to pay their money to see the characters in the timelines that they actually care about. There was an article the other day that they were talking about basically reformatting Galaxy's Edge and moving in Mandalorian characters and setting it up more in that timeline. So that should tell you that the popularity of the show, they were going to throw out 3 big blockbuster movies that throw those ideas out and bring this small 16 episode TV show that doesn't even have an hour runtime. So that's what an impact this show has made on the Star Wars universe. So my favorite show of 2020, since I couldn't pick The Mandalorian, was The Boys Season 2. As we become more immersed in the superhero culture, The Boys take a fast, hard, violent look at the battle between good and evil. But unlike everything that DC and Marvel tell you, sometimes the good guys don't wear capes. It's just a fantastic show, an Amazon original. It's violent, it's sexy, it's over the top, and it's a lot of fun. And Carl Urban brings it in every single episode. He just commands your attention every single time he's on the screen.
Yeah, and The Boys is the other show that would have been my top 2. Just like The Mandalorian, this season could have gone off the rails, and it didn't. What's great about the show is it was more over the top. It was more violent. It was crazier, and somehow they managed to keep things together, and it's relevant to what's going on now. Strange somehow they, it was like, while we're watching, I was like, wow, did like, when did they write this? How did they predict what was gonna, a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. But no, the show is phenomenal. It's one of the best shows on TV, and great take on the superhero genre. It's hilarious. I mean, there's just so many great gags and great jokes. Yeah, one of the shows I can't wait to see what happens the next few seasons. And it's funny, when Game of Thrones ended, I was kind of sad, like what's ever gonna reach those heights. And we have this kind of almost golden age of TV where like we have so many great shows now that you barely think about how great Game of Thrones was. I mean, and The Boys is one of those where I'm really excited, and I think next year is going to be awesome.
Cut back to 2019, and Hollywood was at an unstoppable pace. It was just a juggernaut. Every top 10 grossing movie of all time was always looking over its shoulder for the next big movie to come along and knock it out of the list. But the world pushed the big pause button on the big screen, and we were able to piece together our top 3 movies, even though the pickings were slim. Thank God for streaming. Kim, what was your number 3 movie this year?
So my number 3 movie was Birds of Prey. It was, I guess, Margot Robbie's introduction into producing, I believe. It actually didn't do too bad. Even with everything still going on, it still got 84 million, I believe, at the box office, 85 million, which is pretty admirable for something that, right off the gate had gotten awful reviews. Like before the movie had even come out, it was like they just kind of predetermined that it was just going to suck. Quite frankly, I liked it. And a lot of people tend to agree with that because the Rotten Tomatoes scores are even quite high the last time I looked. I felt like it was a little bit more deranged and a little bit more, there was like some psychoses going on here, especially having come out of the Joker and having that whole realm. Like it was really going to take something that had some effort into it and maybe a little bit more of an emotional flair in order for me to really kind of grasp onto it. And I ended up liking it. I didn't think I was going to, but I was pleasantly surprised. So kudos to Margot Robbie.
I enjoyed these films, but then again, I enjoyed Suicide Squad. Not everything is going to be Endgame. Not everything is going to be Infinity Wars. But they're still fun movies. There's a lot of good action and exciting moments, and I can't wait for the next Suicide Squad, even though I hate the poster. So I thought Birds of Prey was a halfway decent movie, and it was one of the few movies I got to see in the theaters this year. So those movies in general just made an impact on me. I went from going, 2 or 3 times a month to 3 times in a year.
That was the last movie I actually saw in a theater.
And I just saw it this week. Actually, 2 of my top 3 I just saw this week. Soul. So the most recent Pixar movie stars Jamie Foxx as a jazz teacher who, spoiler alert, dies but finds himself in this kind of in-between world where he has to he doesn't want to go to heaven. He kind of got his big shot and he wants to be able to get back to Earth, and meets Tina Fey, a character voiced by Tina Fey, and they find their way back on Earth. There's kind of a body switching going on. It's a really charming movie. It's really well done. The animation is beautiful. The voice acting is great. It's got some really funny moments. It's not the best Pixar movie I've ever seen. It's not. I think it was missing that like big emotional moment that you get in like something like Up. But beyond that, I really loved the movie. I thought, again, it was really charming, a kind of return to form from Pixar, and maybe the best Pixar movie I've seen in a while. So while it's not like the greatest Pixar movie ever, it is really, really good. And in a year where there are quite a few movies, when I was looking at what I've seen throughout the year, there are quite a few good movies, not much that really, really, really stands out. And so this is one that ekes into my top 3. And again, really good movie, really fun, and I definitely recommend it.
So my number 3, hold on here while I take a breath, because it's the first of 3 sequels, and this one is Borat's subsequent movie film, delivery of prodigious bribe to American regime for make benefit, once glorious nation of Kazakhstan. So what a mouthful of a title, and I love it. All right. It's in all reality, it's a terrible movie, but it is so timely with everything going on, and he made it really fast. I mean, it makes fun of politics, it makes fun of the pandemic, and it made fun of it at a time when we needed some comic relief about something that quite literally has sucked for now an entire year, and probably looking for at least another 6 months it's going to suck. But Borat, just like his original movie, is like naive and disgusting and all kinds of things going on with him. And it's just one of those things that they changed some things in it to make it so that this guy that now everyone knows could still walk around and partake in things and show up and destroy things and make things bad, like showing up at a Republican convention and trying to present a woman to Mike Pence. Like, in today's world, how could you get past the 47 layers of security and still make that happen? And it happened. It actually happened. Now, obviously, the view that we got in the movie and the view that showed up from news outlets and other things, it's not quite as big a deal as it showed in the movie. But he was there. He was spouting some crazy stuff in a crazy Trump fat suit. And that and somehow talking himself to go spend a couple of nights with some rednecks and everything while he's walking around with a magnifying glass and a frying pan killing the virus himself. There's just all kinds of nonsense that goes on, but you know what? I liked it. It was a good amount of humor.
I remember being in the theater watching Borat. I think that's also part of it is you have that infectious laughter watching it in the theaters, like seeing the first one. And I don't think it ever, and part is that, watched it at home. It never quite reaches the level of kind of hilarity that the first one reaches, but it's still really funny. It's crazy to watch him have to really transform himself to get into these situations because everyone kind of knows Borat. The woman who plays his daughter was amazing. I don't know where she's from or what she'd been in before, but she does a fantastic job. And her performance is great. Yeah, it is a fun movie and kind of came out of nowhere. I had lower expectations. I just didn't think anything could meet what the original was. And so it did surpass my expectations to some extent. So it was definitely fun. But yeah, you're never going to get like what we got with that first Borat film.
My number 3 is The Invisible Man. Being a huge fan of horror and suspense, there was nothing this year more visibly gripping and violent as the Elizabeth Moss-led thriller. Imagine you're in a bad relationship and your ex has the ability to do the most horrible things to you in the worst way and go completely undetected. The movie was definitely predictable at times, but the story pays off and it was just visually fun to watch. And it's terrifying to think about if you put it into real world consequences. So for me, that was number 3. Kim, what's your number 2?
It wasn't in theaters that I'm aware of, but my number 2 was actually a documentary, and it's called The Social Dilemma. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it, but it basically explores the dark side of how social media is psychologically impacting people of all ages, not just, kids, but how is it impacting teenagers? How is it impacting adults and their relationships at home? And what is it doing to, what kind of an impact is it having on families? And it really kind of makes you think, especially at a time when this movie comes out and we're all stuck at home, right? And everyone's face is just kind of glued to their phone, especially during all these lockdowns and whatnot this year. It almost made me a little bit hesitant about hopping on social media for a while. I'd kind of backed off of it for a few months just to see if I could, because I tried to quit Facebook once before and it's peer pressure, oh, you can't, I wanted to tag you in this picture, but you're not on Facebook. But yeah, it just really kind of makes you think and how things that you allow into your life can have that kind of a negative impact on you. And you have to be mentally conscious enough in order to kind of have control over it. But it's really easy to fall into that trap of being, consumed and preoccupied by something else. It's a thinker. And honestly, it was really, really well shot. The actors did a phenomenal job because it kind of plays out like a movie, but it's a movie documentary, and it was really, really good in my opinion. I'd totally watch it again.
Yeah, it's a really nice look at how we're being programmed, not only by social media, but even Google. The way they design their mailboxes is so you check it more and so you stay there and read emails more. It's crazy the level that these companies will go to for you to continue to use their product. Ryan, you're number 2.
All right, so my number 2 is Hamilton. So yeah, I totally forgot. It's like such a crazy year, but that it was released by Disney Plus. I was fortunate enough to see it with most of the original cast, with the exception of Daveed Diggs, who plays Jefferson. And then he was gone from the show by the time I had any chance to see it. And I think he's a fantastic actor and love his work anyway. So for me, it was really fun to watch because obviously it's the original cast of the show, but also with him in it didn't disappoint. But I just love the musical. I'm not a huge fan of musicals, but I think Hamilton is worth all of the hype. The music is fantastic. The set design is amazing. The choreography is incredible. The story, is gripping and it holds your attention for the entire amount of time. And I, really love that Disney Plus did decide to release it. Like, who knows when it would have been released had they not, had COVID not, been, kept everybody at home. But it was really, really great to watch, and I really enjoyed it, and something it's infinitely rewatchable. And so I'm really, really happy that it was released. And again, in a year where we didn't really get all that many movies, that definitely sneaks into my list as number 2.
So number 2 is my second sequel of the list, and all 3 are sequels. Number 2 is Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So did we need this movie? Absolutely not. Was it timely? No, we should have had it 15 years ago. Do I love Bill and Ted? Hell yeah, let's go. Rock on. Let's get it done. Seeing Keanu Reeves go back to comedy, first of all, after all of the John Wick and all the other badass things he's done recently, I'm into it. I like it. I'm right there. Seeing him back with Alex Winter, I'm there too. They brought Death back. Like, what other things can you ask for in a Bill and Ted movie? It was just a lot of fun. It wasn't that great of a movie. It honestly wasn't. But the nostalgia hit me right where I needed to be hit. And again, this is a year where I've spent countless hours watching old TV shows, reruns. Like I've gone through Futurama a couple of times, American Dad, The Office before it left Netflix. I made sure and watch it one last time. Old seasons of Shameless, so many different things, and getting a Bill and Ted thing thrown in the middle of that I had never seen before. I'm all about it. So yeah, Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Number 2 for me was a Kevin Costner movie, which is odd, seeming it's not the 1990s. Over the last few years, Kevin Costner has found his niche as a ranch hand, or rancher, or a cop. In this movie, he gets to be both. The name of the movie is Let 'Em Go, Ig, and it examines how far you would go to save your grandchild if you thought he was in danger. Would you rush into danger, guns blazing? Would you murder for him? It's an interesting look at not only grandparents, but the miscommunication between families when it comes to custody of children. It gets really weird in a hurry. It gets really violent, and it was one of the few films I actually got to see in the theaters this year. That's why it's number 2 for me. I love this older version of Kevin Costner. I really thought that he would be irrelevant by now, but over the last couple years, he's kind of really brought it, and he's still one of my favorites. Kim, what's your number 1 movie?
Okay, so my number 1 movie of last year has got to be The Gentleman. I freaking loved this movie. And it was, again, one of those movies where it was like one of those last ones I actually got to go and sit down in a theater. And I flew to St. Louis. I picked up my best friend, Jake. This is what we do at least once a year. We went to the movies and we saw this. And I freaking loved it. It's a Guy Ritchie film, I believe, right? And it's got Matthew McConaughey in it, and Colin Farrell, and Charlie Hunnam, I think. Hunnam. Anyway, it was such a freaking good movie about, a guy who kind of gets wrapped up in, I guess, marijuana, drug sales and whatnot. And the way that he and his wife kind of end up coming together. And I don't know, man, I just really freaking like this movie. It's got action. It's got, some naughty bits in it. It's got some comedy. It's got a little bit of everything. And I really, really like this movie. And it was a great film to be able to kind of just chill, and watch this and kind of get lost in this incredible set of actors and whatnot. So I was really happy that it actually got to make it out into the theaters. And I know that it came out, this is one of those movies where it came out and then within like a month and a half, it went straight to streaming, not because of being bad. I mean, it did pretty decent in the theaters, but because all of the theaters had started getting shut down, and, production companies and whatnot were scrambling to try to recuperate losses and whatnot. So I feel like, if you were to look at the stats for how much the movie physically brought in, I feel like it's going to be a little bit askew, but it's completely something I would recommend, especially if you're a McConaughey fan.
So my number 1 movie, again, another one I just saw this week, but it's Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. So it's based on a play. It could take place in the 1920s, and most of the movie is revolving around a recording session that's going on with this with a blues band. It's based on a play, so it's very wordy. The dialogue is great. All the performances are really good, but 2 in particular are phenomenal and Oscar worthy. Viola Davis, who's one of the best actresses like of our time, is in it, and it is just like a powerhouse. Like, I don't use that word a lot for acting performances, but that's her. She's incredible, but as great as she is, even better is Chadwick Boseman. And I think if it's not his last performance, it might, it's one of the last performances of his. And, you can see physically, he definitely looks like he's very thin, and that's probably, he's probably right in the throes of dealing with his cancer, but he gives every bit of 100% of himself in it. It's one of the best performances I've ever seen. I can't imagine him in a better performance. I mean, if that doesn't win an Oscar, I don't know what does. Like it was that good. I mean, it's just I can't even describe it. You just have to watch, and he's just magnetic every moment that he's on screen. And to think that he could do that while dealing with the terminal illness is unfathomable. But it's just a phenomenal movie. Again, the performances are great. The story is really good, and I highly recommend anybody go see it. Again, he and Viola Davis are just when they're on screen, you're just glued. And like, I know we didn't get a lot of movies, but this would probably be number 1 or 2 on my list if it was a normal year of movies. That's how good it was.
So my number 1 movie, another sequel, and one that's bound to get groans, but you're going to have to stick with me here for a few minutes. Wonder Woman, 1984.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Wonder Woman 1984 is a terrible movie. Terrible.
Yes.
They put we've seen Wonder Woman in a timeline past this movie, right? Doing things Wonder Woman does. But somehow they go back and they just put in a whole bunch of abilities that she didn't have before. Now she can fly. She can make physical things just invisible now. So now she has an invisible jet that is only, but if she touches it, invisible. All kinds of terrible stuff.
That's okay. SpongeBob had an invisible car once, so I'm not that impressed.
Yeah, we can go with that. But still, it was just, there were so many things. Like, it was just really poorly done. It was not a good story to pull from. Like, Wonder Woman has 80 years of stories. They could have found something better than some wish rock that they went with. But that's what they went with. But why this is my number 1 movie of the year isn't because it was even a watchable movie. And I did watch it, and that's 2.5 hours I'm not getting back. But what it did was, I think it's putting pressure on all the other studios to do what Warner Brothers is doing and putting all of their 2020 releases on HBO Max that you can watch for 31 days without any additional cost.
Are we sponsored?
We're going to be able to see, I wish I was. We're going to be able to see Dune. We're going to be able to see a whole bunch of things. Like, I can't wait for Dune. Dune looks really good. But there's so many things coming out this year, and I'm just hoping that the other studios realize that movie theaters aren't coming back for easily another 6 months. Which means you're only going to get half a year possibly. And even then, it's going to be a trickle back. It's not people are going to flood the theaters. They're going to trickle back in. And they're going to have to find a new way to get us to go back in with their $15 tickets and their $72 popcorns. This is a way to make some money. You know what? Take a cut out of streaming. Because how much money do these movies make when they go to streaming services anyway? Because I'm sure there's metrics that they get. It may only be pennies, but if I watch Wonder Woman 3 times, they're getting my pennies 3 times. And if I watch Dune 4 times, they'll get my pennies 4 times. While the movie isn't great, what it has done for the movie industry currently is why it's my number 1 movie. I think that it's important that the movie theaters have gone way too far out of whack for too long now. It was not that long ago that a Saturday night movie was only $5, and it's nowhere near that anymore. And I think we need to appreciate that HBO Max and Warner Brothers have decided to say, hey, we know this year is going to suck for a good portion of it. Let's give you a little bit of a break this year.
I'm all for HBO giving us all that content, but they still could have put out a passable movie. It's just
maybe they need the subscription dues in order to build a bigger budget.
It was so frustrating because the first Wonder Woman is great. I don't love the battle at the end, between her and Ares, but everything leading up to that is awesome. Like the no man's land scene, it was just great. And then it's just there's very little redeemable. Chris Pine's awesome. He's actually really good. You know what? The best thing to watch is, watch the pitch meeting of this. I think it's the best takedown of the movie. If you haven't seen the pitch meeting of Wonder Woman yet, it's such a great takedown of the movie because it just really is it's just bad. It's frustrating because Patty Jenkins is a good director, and I don't get it. I don't know if it's a script which she was part of, or what. But it was just, I don't know. There's a lot of things they could have done different to make this movie work, and I don't know why they made the choices they made, because it wasted some really good performances. But is what it is.
My number one movie of the year is the same as Kim's, and it's from Guy Ritchie, and it's The Gentleman. He's made some of my favorite movies, but he's also made some amazing bombs over the last couple of years. But with The Gentleman, he hit a grand slam. It's slick, it's violent, it's smooth, it's compelling, and it's got a lot of great performances. As Mickey Pearson navigates the pitfalls of being England's biggest drug dealer, while trying to be an American and being the fish out of water, but he's also trying to retire and sell his business. And the hordes of enemies are kind of out to get him. Matthew McConaughey's just amazing in this. Colin Farrell is amazing in this. But in my opinion, Hugh Grant stole the entire movie. The Gentleman probably is the best movie of 2020. From COVID to the election, to the shutdown of the country, to the fight for racial equality, to streaming services becoming king, these are the stories that define 2020. Ryan, what was the story that hit you the most?
Since we're a pop culture podcast, I'm going to stick with the pop culture story that resonated the most with me, and I feel like it's the kind of budding streaming wars, where we have the situation now where effectively streaming is like you cut the cord for cable, but now it's like with HBO Max releasing what they're releasing and really going all in with the DC content, they've thrown themselves in, and you have Netflix as already a dominant player. Amazon's dominant player in it, then Hulu, and you just have so much that I think that for me, as we almost have too much with all the different streaming services. Even Apple TV has got some great offerings. It's like a blessing and a curse, because we have all this great content, but it's like with so much content you can't watch. It's not possible to watch everything. So I think the streaming wars for me is interesting. Also seeing some of the bombs like Quibi, came and went. Even the DC had a great little, streaming service for a while, but then they've kind of bled that in with Warner Brothers, which now I'm thinking there were a couple shows on DC that I totally forgot on my top shows list. But yeah, I think the streaming wars is something that's really interesting to me, because it seems like that's where we're headed now, with Warner Brothers, taking the next step to move, putting out a lot of their content on their streaming service. Like, it's going to be interesting to see what happens from there. How does Disney respond? How does how does Disney, respond with their Marvel and Pixar and Star Wars content? We already have like Netflix and Amazon release movies on their platforms anyway, so could be a major shift, especially with COVID and with people not going to theaters, maybe not wanting to go back to theaters. So next year or so is gonna be really interesting. I just hope that I don't have to spend hundreds of dollars now to keep up with everything that's out there.
So I guess my big thing for 2020, my thing that affected me the most and everything, was all the shutdowns. And the biggest reason it affects me is because I work for a school bus company. So kids don't go to school, I sit at home. Well, what do I get to do when I sit at home? Well, I get to stream everything from the beginning of time until now. So I've watched endless amounts of things going on. I haven't had a haircut since February of last year, and I get to watch people complain about things about not being able to get haircuts. And at this point, I could have gotten one. I could even cut my own hair. Wouldn't have been a big deal.
Looks like you did.
Yeah, I know. But it just turns into one of those things where, is it really that big a deal? Everybody's like, oh, I got to be able to go get my nails done or my hair done or sit in a restaurant or do this. I've eaten lots of restaurant food in the last year. I just get it to go because I still want my local restaurants to survive. So I go buy food from them. And I still try and find some of the local places that make things and try and call and do an order and buy some things from them because I want my local businesses to survive. Rather than buying everything at Target or Walmart, sometimes I'll go to the local Ace Hardware and get things from them because it's about the same price. Maybe it's a little bit more, maybe something else is going on, but look, they're a local business that's owned locally that I want them to survive. So everybody is throwing a big fit about why can you go into Target? Well, because Target has everything. Target's got groceries. Target has toilet paper. Target has clothing. Target has everything. So if you need to survive, you can get it at Target. You can get it at Sam's. You can get it at Walmart. I get it. Do you need the mom and pop pipe cleaner tobacco shop down the block to stay open all the time so that you can make funny little characters out of different tchotchkes? Well, probably not. But it caused a lot of places to learn how to pivot. Squarespace has probably done great business lately because a lot of people are building websites and getting e-commerce going and finding ways to survive in an economy where things are getting shut down. And honestly, it's what needed to happen. And it's happened in past pandemics. Of course, none of us that are listening to this show were alive when the last one hit, but shutdowns happened then. They had to stop school in all but 2 major cities. They kept people at home. It happened, and we're struggling, but we're going to get through it, everybody. We are. And so it's been a big thing for me. I've spent a lot of time at home. It's been very stressful. My finances are teetering most of the time, but I'm finding a way to get through, and we're all going to get through it together. So that's my top story of 2020.
The shutdowns it sucks. Like, I think we're in an impossible situation, and you know, there's 2 reactions. I think as we're seeing as a country, you can kind of come together and say, how do we get through this together? How can we support, you know, support businesses and support each other and find ways to do this together? Or how can we argue and complain and you know, and do whatever we can to be, you know, kind of contrarian and, you know, march in Targets with masks off because sure. And so we see kind of the best and worst of people, you know, while this is going on. But yeah, to kind of piggyback off Vig, it's like, you know, this has happened before. We should be able to come together and we get through it. You know, some amazing things have come out of this. Like we have a vaccine. You know, we came up with, you know, normally the fastest vaccine I think ever took like 2 years or more. And we've got one in less than a year. So, you know, it is a testament to science and to our ability to kind of get through things. But like, I feel it's like this situation where it's like, okay, will American, or not just American, but largely like, will American stupidity be able to outrun this like virus? Like we you know, why can't we just kind of just hunker down and get through this? And part of it is people, but also part of it's just our government and not having a government that, and this is not political because I think there's culpability everywhere, but like, I mean, I should say not like Democrat, Republican. It's like it's everywhere, but like not having, you know, kind of a safety net and a government that we trust has our best interests in heart. And then we, you know, see kind of this has been decades of stuff that we were not ready for this, but as a society and as a government. And, you know, hopefully we get through it and hopefully we learn that, you know, we need to come together in times like this and not kind of be just a mess of people who are like fighting it with each other and arguing all over.
But that's who we become, right? Somebody said to me even today, like, hey, did you see the New Year's Eve celebrations? There's some countries where they're back to normal. And I said, yeah. And then you look at Times Square and there's like 10 people there. Why? Because of the way we treated this. Rather than everybody come together and throw their masks on, we want to yell about our rights. And we want to yell about the fact that we can't eat inside or go to bars. Nobody was willing to make the sacrifice. So this turned something that could have been a 3 or 4 month problem to over a year just catastrophe. And as the numbers grow, we're looking at a couple more 100,000 dead by the time that they actually get a handle on it and really get these vaccines out to people. It was just a question of being an adult. Nobody's trying to stop you from doing anything. And it wasn't forever. Nobody said that, hey, you can't go to Chuck E. Cheese for the rest of your life. It was, hey, you can't go to Chuck E. Cheese for the next couple months, and then we'll be fine once we get through this. It took people to see it for themselves to stop denying it, to get it. I had a staunch anti-mask, anti-COVID coworker, and it was only till his cousin got it did he realize, and he thought he had it himself, did he realize like, hey, this is a problem. I need to start treating this responsibly. Nobody wanted to wear the mask. It was uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to stay home. It's boring. But if we would have done it, we would have been through this and Times Square would have been packed.
Well, I actually had COVID and I had a horrible freaking experience with it. And I wear a mask all day long when I'm at the office. If I'm going out in public, I'm wearing the damn thing. No, I don't like it, but I also don't want to die. And more importantly, I don't want somebody else to get sick as a result of, you know, my arrogance or my ignorance or whatever. Like I have some empathy for other people, despite what you may think. But, you know, so for me, it hit me like a ton of bricks. It required a couple trips to the emergency room. I had over 103 fever for going on 11 days. Nothing broke it. And even the emergency room doctors who were basically in hazmat suits, which is, by the way, never an experience that anybody should ever have to go through, because it was like being, on a spaceship and seeing these aliens or astronauts walking in and not basically being afraid to touch you. Like, they gave me a syringe of steroids and told me to just shoot it in my mouth, because they didn't want to give me an IV, because puncturing the skin might cause, blood particles to become airborne, and that's a hazard. So it's fucking terrifying. And the fact that people aren't taking it seriously, I mean, there is probably no reason on this planet that I should even be alive. I am 100% convinced that I probably should have kicked the bucket. No joke, without a doubt, that's how awful I felt. I could not breathe. I passed out in the shower. I didn't think I was going to wake up. I don't know how long I was in there. It was terrifying. And, unfortunately, I even have friends and family members who, they don't take this shit seriously. They don't care, because my rights. Yeah, I get it. But we also have a right to live. And you should probably respect that a little bit more than how your vanity is.
I agree with you. It's been an eye-opening experience, that not only how divided this country is, but how ignorant we can be in the face of something that most definitely will kill some people if they come in contact with it. Well, for me, the biggest story of the year was on May 25th in the sleepy hamlet of Minneapolis, Minnesota. 47-year-old George Floyd allegedly passed a counterfeit $20 bill. What happened next not only changed the course of this country, but resonated throughout the world, as Black Lives Matter went from a catchy slogan to three of the most important words in modern dialogue. After months of protests, we're nowhere near where we need to be, but we're miles from where we've been. The reason it's my top story was we basically watched this guy publicly executed. For why? For what? And if you watch this and you really watch it and you put yourself in the position of George Floyd as the life is basically being smothered out of you, how is this still happening to anybody? How does this happen? For me, I watched it 2 or 3 times and I was just in disbelief that nobody stepped up, nobody did anything, and this guy was allowed to be just executed. It affected me in ways I can't describe. I'm a staunch defender of the police. I think that we need them. I think it's important. I think that without it, you have chaos and anarchy. But at the same time, it just reminded me how far we haven't come, how much needs to be changed, how much accountability needs to be pushed back on the people that are supposed to be out there protecting and serving.
So this hit really close to home for me for multiple reasons. One, it's less than 10 miles from where I live to where he was killed, because I live in the Twin Cities here in Minnesota. And so this happened here, and the resulting riots and looting and everything else that happened right here. Like, so much so that we were, for the school bus company, we were delivering lunches to families so that their children could get school lunches during the pandemic because they weren't in school. And we had to suspend service because we needed to keep our drivers safe, because they were going to be driving in neighborhoods very close to where this happened, because one day a week we were going into Minneapolis. And so we had to stop that. So that hit me there, right? Because it's here. And then it hit me because I'm part of a multiracial family, right? My wife is Black. And watching how people react to this, especially on social media, watching people talk about whatever he's done in his past and how he's lived his life and everything, like any of that gives any cop the right to kill him for $20. Because the way I looked at it, it said Minneapolis police believe that a Black life is worth $20 because they took his life over a past possibly fake $20 bill. And we're supposed to be better than this. We're supposed to be the melting pot. I mean, that's what I've been told since I went to school as a young boy, is that America's the melting pot. And it just comes to show that in the last few years, it's become more and more apparent from some of the country's leadership that it's okay if you want to be a racist. But I'm here to tell you, it's not. And the only way that we're going to get through everything together is to do it together. And race is nothing to me except a descriptor, because sometimes it's easier to say, hey, the Black guy over in that corner over there, than just say Ryan, because nobody knows Ryan unless I say it's the Black guy over there. So I'm one of those things where it hit really close to home, and it's still happening, and they've erected beautiful memorials where it happened. And I'm glad that that's happening, but too many people are still taking too many frivolities with rampant racism all over the place, and it needs to stop. People need to get better control of themselves.
I think what was kind of shocking to me about that whole scenario and the tragedy that happened as a result is I'm here in the South, normally very church-going, happy-go-lucky individuals that I thought were just, sweet as pie, became these disgusting monsters. You see people and for what they really truly are whenever their opinions start to kind of show through. You see their true colors. If anything, it taught me a lot about, there's still a lot that needs to be changed. Obviously, that's clearly the basic consensus of what we're talking about here. But to walking into here, all of the BLM protests were very peaceful. There was no riots. There was no whatever. It was, they had a clear message. They wanted to send it. It's not okay for, anyone, and specifically Black people, to be gunned down or to be mercilessly killed, for any reason. Everyone's got a right. You have rights. Okay. And that doesn't give anyone the authority or the ability to take your life away from you over something so petty. You know what I mean? He didn't do anything. I don't care if he had a heroin addiction. I don't care if he was high as hell at the time. That does not give anybody the right to take your life, because you have that right to live. We all have the same, the covenants and restrictions of being American citizens. We all have the same rules that we're supposed to abide by. And okay, so maybe he wasn't perfect. There's not a single person on this planet it is, but being here in the South and seeing just how incredibly divided. I mean, it happened so quick too. It was boom. You're either on the left or you're the right. And that's it. The signs were going up in people's yards, and it was like the Civil War was about to commence. People were ready. They were stockpiling ammunition. They were, it just became this ugly mess. And it was something I had not seen before. And it was pretty freaking scary, and I'm alabaster white. So I can only imagine how terrifying that would be for somebody of color, of any color, to be in this area at that time, and how awkward or how tense that may make you feel. I mean, there's no reason that kids should be afraid to go outside and play.
Yeah, well, look, growing up Black in New York, with our wonderful police department, I know firsthand, like, the liberties police will take. Look, we could talk about this for hours. There's so many, issues at play, but I think the important thing with the kind of Black Lives Matter movement, especially as it happened, is, unfortunately it took, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor to put a magnifying glass to something that's been going on for a long time. And there are a couple of issues there. Obviously there's an issue with policing and maybe, training and how they handle situations like that. I think there's an issue of kind of how we militarize our police and maybe overwork them and get, put them in situations where maybe there are other professionals that are better suited. I think there's also an issue of how police, if you have a community that doesn't trust the police, and you always have this combative relationship, you're always going to have problems. I think there's a lot of reform that needs to happen, and so I think one of the important things that came out of it was the kind of defund the police movement. But like with everything, I think the narrative changes very quickly and things get overly politicized. So like when it came to the protests, as Kim said, they were peaceful by her. I was at a bunch of protests. They were all very peaceful. I think the vast majority of protests were peaceful, but somehow the narrative got changed to, rioting and looting and violence. And so then you had to preface anything you said about protesting with, well, I admonish anybody who's violent. And then all of a sudden the narrative changes to, there are these violent protests, being sparked all over the place, where it's like, no, they're protests. Very small percentage of the time they're violence, often started by saboteurs on the right. But the narrative changed there. Or with like defund the police, like the narrative changed to, it's not abolish police. It's, let's reform, the police. Let's put money towards, let's redirect some money that maybe is going towards buying them military grade weapons and send it to social workers and better training and send more money to the community. And so, I think the good thing is that there are certain things that came out of it that hopefully get implemented and become a real part of our world. My fear, though, is that everything has become so politicized that you just change the narrative and then it's whoever's got the louder, megaphone, and that's who's going to win that battle of the narrative. And unfortunately, I think on the right, it does become a left versus right thing. And I think the left is very weak on things like this. And so even you saw during the election where instead of facing it head on, even all the politicians on the left were very quick to say, no, I admonish this, I admonish that, I admonish that. But I do believe in Black Lives Matter. But, rather than saying, no, here's what the movement's about, here's what we believe in, and here's why we want to make things equal. And so I'm a little skeptical and fearful that, we'll, in another few months, we'll have another George Floyd and people will be outraged again. And it'll just be this cycle of like, somebody dies on camera. Let's, bad police, everybody's outraged. And then we'll just get back to the same thing where politicians pay some lip service, say the right things, and then just hope that it kind of all goes away in a few months.
After a long year where we only did a handful of shows, there is a full slate of pop culture programming on the way in 2021. You've heard me repeatedly preach kindness. Repeatedly. I've asked everyone that listens to just be kind to each other. This time it's patience with your loved ones, with your coworkers, with your friends. Everyone out there is suffering together with fears of COVID, unemployment, loss. I mean, not a person listening to the show or someone hasn't been touched by this pandemic in one way or the other. Essentially, our government has abandoned us, so people are kind of left to fend for themselves. The vaccine's on its way, but it's still a long way off for some, and this is going to be the hardest winter of most of our lives. So be patient. Be patient with your loved ones. Be caring to people you don't know. Be understanding to the people that are struggling and maybe saying things that aren't very popular because they're just frustrated. Find it in your heart. Share it. And in the immortal words of Jackie Moon, everybody just love everybody. Come on. And let's hope for a kinder, gentler 2021. We are so happy that you guys show up every week and listen to this nonsense. We show up, we review stuff, we try to make you laugh and make you wonder, don't these people have anything better to do with their lives? And the answer in a word is no. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.